We will talk about this book, which has been published a few years ago. The title is Solomon's Knot: How Law Can End the Poverty of Nations. It has been written by you as well as by Robert Cooter. Unfortunately, Bob has passed away last year.
I visited India in the 1970s and had my first contacts with Indian economists, and I remember that at the time, and even today it has not changed at all, the Indians were always comparing themselves with China. At the time, in the late 1970s, the Indian per capita income was about 25% higher than in China. So China was much below. In South Africa, you had the apartheid policy. And that was all regulated by law. So there were laws which created the inequality between the white and the non-white in South Africa. It was a legally imposed inequality, but it was still a law. That is, if for instance, in South Africa, a white man or a white person would discriminate against a black person in a way which is not covered by the law, then still this black person had access to court and could do something about it.
Kapitalne Rozmowy.
This is a special episode of Capital Conversations. The Capital Conversation, this is the channel which is developed by Andrzej Mierzwa, but we collaborate because I'm from the Polish Economists Association, and we have those special events when we go abroad. Andrew went abroad to France many times, but this time we are in Germany, and we have a distinguished guest speaker today, with whom I'm going to talk about the book, which is, in my opinion, illuminating. Hans-Bernd Schaefer, emeritus professor of University of Hamburg, but still present at Bucerius School of Law. Yes, Hans-Bernd Schaefer. We know each other for many years, and I'm very happy that you invited me to your home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaroslav.
And we will talk about this book, which has been published a few years ago. The title is Solomon's Knot: How Law Can End the Poverty of Nations. It has been written by you as well as by Robert Cooter. Unfortunately, Bob has passed away last year, so he's no longer with us, but you are with us, and you need to tell us about this, because I think you were somehow inspired to write this book by China, correct?
By China. China played a role in the book.
So I'm not revealing any secrets.
It was not particularly China, but I have always been interested in development economics. My whole career started with development economics. I was an assistant professor at the University of Bochum in the Institute of Economic Development, Institute of Development, an institute which still exists. And we were, of course, dealing with questions of developing countries. And during that time, I visited India in the 1970s, and had my first contacts with Indian economists, And I remember that at the time, and even today it has not changed at all, the Indians were always comparing themselves with China. You know. At the time, in the late 1970s, the Indian per capita income was about 25% higher than in China. So China was much below India, and that has, of course, changed so dramatically. And insofar, the developments, starting in the 1980s already in China, were one motivation to write this book, both on Bob Cooter's side and on my side.
But this is not about the competition between India and China. It's more about whether the law can elevate the country from the poverty towards at least middle-sized economy, correct? But by the way, I think the competition between India and China is still going on, isn't it? It hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
No.
So one of the things which I like very much is that we also have the same term in Polish, because it's taken from German, Ersatz. You argue in the book, yes, that I think you went to one of the German factories in China. I think it was Siemens, or it could be the other one. Yes, and the way of Ersatz, which you notice, yes, there were big pictures of party officials on the walls of this foreign company, yes? Yeah. And your argument in the book is that was giving the signal, yes, to the clerks, public clerks coming to this factory, that this factory is protected, yes, that it should not be expelled from the property or whatever.
Yeah, that is right. It was very interesting to see that the managers, the top managers, were on a visit in I think it was in Beijing, and they were shaking hands with Chinese top politicians, not only local politicians, but top politicians whom they had visited. And that showed how far-reaching their contacts and networks are, and and such things are very, very important in a country like China. So I think in Germany you would not see this, even though such contacts are still important, but they have not this overriding importance to that it is necessary or rewarding to show this to everybody.
Coming back to this, okay, one of the things which you are touching here, yes, is the long discussion about rule of law, yes. Mm-hmm. And just please correct me if I grasp it not as you wish, but we've been always taught that there are thin and thick concepts of rule of law, yes. Mm-hmm. The thin ones are related to the property rights, yes. If you can easily expel someone from the property, yes, then, and there is no compensation, then there is no thin rule of law being observed, yes. With the thick one, we both laughed because it was brought by Indian economist Amartya Sen, yes. He says it's not only about the property rights, there are more things, yes. So on which side you are, thin or the thick one? In my humble opinion, you try to argue here that the thick one must be observed as well.
Yes, even though there is a kind of tension, because when we embrace a thick version of rule of law, in the sense, for instance, that we say rule of law is not only formalistic in the sense that the society is run by abstract laws, but that it says, well, but it must be without discrimination, you know. And you could say, for instance, South Africa with the apartheid regime. Was that a rule of law state? If you have a thin...
Chile with Pinochet.
Chile, well, no, it's interesting. But so if you stick to a very thin concept of rule of law, South Africa was a rule of law state during the apartheid. If you compare this to Pinochet now in Chile after, you know, that was different, because that was Pinochet, he murdered thousands of people without any legal procedure, you know. It was simply a brutal dictatorship which did not comply with legal rules. But it was a pure, willful dictatorship. And that is the difference. So here we would not, even if we have the thinnest concept of rule of law, it still rules out a total dictatorship which moves people out of any legal protection. So, for instance, then if you take Germany in the Nazi period, then a very thin concept of the rule of law would be that we still had a rule of law until the beginning of the war. We had already the Nuremberg laws, but they were laws. Yeah. Indeed, the Jews, when they believed that they had not violated this law, could go to court. But then, after the beginning of the war, and especially after 1940, the Jews were removed. They had no rights at all, nothing. That is not so I think there is a difference between these two situations. On the other hand, because if you embrace this thick version of rule of law, you might end up in saying rule of law and good governance is the same thing.
No, I don't think that those terms are the same. Yes, I think there is a lot of...
it goes into that direction. You say, for instance, rule of law also implies that the basic human rights are observed, right?
Indeed.
Rule of law is a state of the government in which people have access to basic goods, to basic needs there, and so on. And so if you fill this up more and more and more, then the very idea of rule of law approaches good governance. And that is, and I think then it loses some of its sharpness.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that that rule of law should be purely formalistic, but it should also not be uploaded with too much content of, let's say, good governance or good of substantive justice to lose its contours.
Kapitalne Rozmowy.
Let us come back to the person whom we admire. His name is Ronald Coase.
Yeah.
And the origin of 1968, that means the article the problem of social cost is a long discussion among economists.
Yes.
How we solve problems, yes? So what Ronald Coase is doing in 1968, he's saying, we shall not tax people, yes, but we shall allow them to negotiate the best solution they see, yes? That's a long discussion, and Ronald Coase tried to argue that if you allow people, of course he made this condition that the level of transaction cost is not killing those discussions, yes? Then we shall allow the people to negotiate the best deal. The question is whether you both with Bob are touching here in the book another fundamental discussion, yes? Whether the law is the best tool to elevate from the rushes to the richness. That's the question. Can we use the law?
Yeah, that is, of course, a fundamental question. We had long discussions on these problems. I had long discussions with Bob Cooter, and I think that Bob Cooter is more than I am somebody who believes in the overriding importance of private ordering. So we had some discussions on this, but we agreed, on the other hand, we agreed that the protection of property cannot be guaranteed by private ordering.
It must be by force. That means the monopoly of force is the state, yes?
The state is, you cannot protect private property, or let's say property rights which are conducive for economic growth, purely on the by letting people do, by spontaneous developments.
I'm on your side, because otherwise it's called mafia, if you allow private order to secure the property rights. Correct?
Yeah, it could develop into
such a scheme, yes.
Such a scheme, certainly.
Hans-Bernd, as you said, the foundations were the development economics for you, yes?
Yeah.
Correct. So development economics, we have to explain a bit, yes? That is how the countries which are poor what kind of policies, yes, they should implement in order to go up, yes, on the ladder of the richness, yes? So the issue was, well, we have to differentiate with the well-established economies with the ones usually with the colonial roots, yes, which are emerging, and that is why that was something in 60s, 70s, which was quite popular, yes. But two questions which appear to my mind is, the first one, what do you think about Central and Eastern Europe, yes? For many years, yes, because of the Soviet impose of power, they were deprived of rule of law, yes? Because the rule of law, in this regard, it had the flavor of dictatorship, yes? As you mentioned with Pinochet, yes? So what do you see after 2004? That's the matter that Poland joined the European Union. Would you see that it was beneficial on the side of the German side, that Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia and other countries joined and they improved the rule of law, in your opinion?
Yes, they joined in 2004 after a long period. I think the Polish application to become a member of the EU was in 1990 or 1991. Huh?
That was really, really quick once we got the
quick.
independence, because we never look at the East, we look at the West.
So it was 14 years altogether, and
I think 1992, but I would have to check the books. Yes, in this regard.
Many things have been changed. You know, I remember when we discussed, that was also part of my teaching for some time, that for instance in Poland you had, then that was a matter of critique, that decisions of the administrative court were enforced by the city administration, not by the courts themselves or by independent, but by the city administration. And that, of course, gave it a bias. So even if the court decision was okay, but then the enforcement was somewhat biased. And that was changed. That is one thing which I still remember from those times when we had, when Poland was a candidate to the EU. And so I think that it changed a lot to the better in Poland compared with the Soviet times. And when you look at the when you look at the economic development of Poland, then it is not a miracle, but so many people call it a miracle, because the per capita growth rate is between 3 and 4% over a long period of time, which is twice as much. I don't know whether that is general knowledge. During the Industrial Revolution, the growth rate of England was much lower. In a time which we usually call revolution, economic revolution. So it's twice as high, roughly, as the growth rate of England during the Industrial Revolution.
We call it,
and this is a process which is going on since the middle of the 90s. In the 90s, it went first down, like in all Eastern European countries, but from 1994, 95, growth is coming up and has maintained a high pace since then. And this is, you find this in Poland, but you find it also in the Baltic states, you find it in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, and so on. These high growth rates.
If I'm correct, I think the growth comes from 1991. The deep was 1990, and then we continue to have the positive growth over 35 years.
Well, one was the collapse of the Soviet Union was in...
Well, we got the independence in 1989, yes, and then the difficult year was 1990. Of course, the ones which were following, they were not the easiest ones, but the growth was continuous. But that's something which perhaps we do not treasure so much in Poland, because we want so much to catch up with the West, yes? So that is why we are running. But of course, the easy ones that were present are diminishing, because that's always the issue of the arbitrage of the remuneration, yes?
Of course.
Skilled people, yes? And that's something. But in general, you would see that Central Eastern Europe went well with also improving rule of law over the years.
Yes, certainly. And, so there is no reason to believe that in the long run, Poland should not have a high per capita income, which is high or might be higher than in the average of Germany. I have studied, when we wrote this book here at Solomon's Knot, we also dealt with historical wages, wage rates, right? And I remember that we had historical wage rates for the city of Krakow in the year in the 780s, so before the Polish divisions, before
partition,
before the partition of Poland. And in Krakow, the average wage of a construction worker was at the time higher, significantly higher than in Leipzig, for instance. So you know that was Poland was really cut off from all the prospects of rapid economic growth by the partitions, and that did not fundamentally change during the 19th century, and changed only with the finally
getting independence,
with the independence of Poland.
The last question. It is not a development economy, yes, but Hans-Bernd Schaefer, what is happening in America with the rule of law? What do you think?
Well, America is a rule of law state at the moment. America is one of the greatest civilizations, but I fear that if the Americans are not very prudent and courageous, that all can change. You know, that is possible. It can change into something very nasty, very negative. You know, if now assume we would stay here and have this discussion in the year, let's say in the year 1900, and we would say, well, there is the possibility that in the 20th century millions of people will be, many Jewish people will be killed. Which country is the candidate for that, to do this? I think that in the year 1919 you would think of other countries and not so much of Germany.
Germany, yes.
You see?
So you...
And that is, and therefore we have experienced we have the experience in Germany that a country which regards itself and is regarded by others as a civilized country can fall into the deepest abyss of barbarism. That is possible, and that is also possible in the United States.
So I take it as a warning, yes. That what has been given is not given for granted, yes. So your suggestion or your recommendation is that you have to be courageous every day, yes, to maintain the rule of law in your country.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much for this talk. We discussed with Professor Hans-Bernd Schaefer, Emeritus Professor of University of Hamburg, but currently still active in Bucerius School of Law. His book, Solomon's Knot, How Law Can End the Poverty of Nations. That is the book written by Hans-Bernd Schaefer as well as Robert Cooter. And I'm mentioning this because I want this book on the Polish market. So I'm sending the signal to all the publishing houses that they should contact me after this interview. Thank you very much, Hans-Bernd.
Thank you, Jaroslav. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kapitalne rozmowy.